Across the zines, interviews, and visual work connected to Love Feels Best, a few recurring currents start to behave less like themes and more like a single rotating prism. Turn it a few degrees and the light changes, but it's always the same source. Here's a conceptual map of the ecosystem.
What's that about?
1. Emotional signal over explanation. A lot of the work resists explaining itself cleanly. Instead, it behaves like a transmission. Rather than saying what love is, it tries to show what it feels like when meaning leaks through ordinary life. Gestures, fragments of text, visual noise, short declarative emotional bursts. The zines especially read like emotional telemetry rather than narrative. Think feelings as data that refuses compression. Number 2, love as infrastructure, not event. A core idea running underneath is that love isn't treated as a climax or romance arc. It's closer to a system that surrounds perception itself. In this framing, kindness is architecture, attention is maintenance, presence is a form of engineering. So, love stops being something that happens and becomes something that holds things up when nothing dramatic is happening. Fragmented identity, unified voice. Even though the work appears in different formats, zines, interviews, street-facing visuals, digital artifacts, it tends to maintain a single emotional signature. This creates a tension. The identity feels distributed, but the tone feels singular, like multiple radios tuned to one frequency that doesn't fully belong to any of them. This is where the project often blurs author versus output on purpose. Number 4, public space as psychological mirror. In the visual and street-oriented piece, less about location and more about cognition, walls, posters, typography, and placement function like prompts placed into shared reality. The viewer isn't just observing art, but accidentally participating in it by encountering it mid-thought. The city becomes a conversational surface. 5. Soft resistance to cynicism. Instead of arguing against cynicism directly, the work often sidesteps it. It doesn't try to defeat negativity with force. It behaves like a parallel channel that simply refuses to route through it. Not optimism as a slogan, but something quieter, a refusal to collapse meaning into irony. Now 6, minimal language, maximum drift text in the zines and visuals tends to be sparse, but it lingers. Meaning is often created in the gap between statements rather than inside them, a kind of controlled ambiguity, enough structure to feel intentional, enough openness to keep recombining in the reader's head. Authorship as a fading edge. With David G., the author function is present but not always centered. The identity behaves more like a node in the system than a traditional spotlighted creator. The work subtly shifts focus from who made this to what this is doing in your perception right now. If you zoom out, the whole thing resembles a kind of emotional cartography, mapping how attention, language, and care move through modern life when they're not forced into strict narrative shape. If you want, I can also break it down further into a symbol dictionary, recurring visual motifs and what they tend to activate psychologically. Alright, here's a symbol dictionary style map of recurring motifs across Love Feels materials, zines, visuals, interviews, street-facing work. Think of it like decoding a small language that keeps rewriting itself mid-sentence. Symbol dictionary of Love Feels Best. 1. Hearts, especially imperfect ones. Not the polished Valentine kind. These show up more like uneven strokes, hand-drawn, slightly off symmetry, sometimes fragmented or repeated. What it tends to signal: love as something made, not discovered. A practice with visible seams. Number 2. Handwritten text, imperfect typography. Often looks like it could have been written quickly, emotionally, or in a single pass. Psychological effect. It collapses distance between sender and receiver. It doesn't feel designed at you, it feels spoken through you. Core idea: language as a live wire, not a polished product. Number 3. Repetition of short phrases. Short loops like declarative emotional lines, simple affirmations, sometimes broken or restacked words. Effect: it behaves like memory trying to stabilize itself. Interpretation: meaning doesn't arrive once, it echoes until it sticks. 4. White space, emptiness. Large areas of nothing, especially in zine layouts. Not absence, pressure field. It functions like silence in music, pause between thoughts, emotional buffering space. Effect on viewer: you start filling it in yourself, which makes the work partially self-authored. 5. Everyday objects flattened into symbols. Things like receipts, packaging fragments, street signage, simple domestic visuals. Transformation. They stop being objects and become evidence of being alive in time. Hammer 6. Glitch-like distortion layering. Overlapping images, slight misalignment, visual noise. Effect. Reality feels slightly unstitched. Interpretation. Memory, emotion, and perception aren't clean channels. They bleed into each other. 7. Love as repeated anchor word. The word appears less as a theme and more like a stabilizing pole in a drifting system. Important nuance. It's not romanticized as an endpoint. It's used like a compass point, a grounding frequency, a return address for attention. 8. Faces or human presence, partial, obscured, or indirect. When people appear, they often aren't fully centered or clearly defined. Effect. Identity is suggested rather than declared. Interpretation. The work is more interested in experience of presence than portraiture. 9. Street placement logic. Context as meaning engine. Where something is placed matters as much as what it says. A phrase on a wall, a corner, a transitional space changes meaning based on interruption of daily flow. Core idea. Meaning is situational, not fixed. 10. Soft saturation color palettes. Even when visually bold, it avoids aggressive contrast effects. It doesn't shout, it lingers. Interpretation. Emotional intensity without coercion. Underlying pattern. The real code. If you compress all of this, the system behaves like, open quote, a language designed to bypass interpretation and land directly as feeling, then reconstruct meaning after impact, close quote. Or more simply, it doesn't ask you to understand first, it asks you to notice and lets understanding arrive late, if at all. If you want, I can go one level deeper and map how these symbols interact across different modes of the work, zines versus street work versus interviews, almost like different dialects of the same emotional language.